Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast with Bill, the company's expert. And you guys are in for a treat in this episode because we're not only going to be discussing bad managers, why so many managers are quite simply awful and drive people away from jobs. And this is coming from a manager, okay? This is coming from somebody who started off as a supervisor, became a frontline manager, became a middle manager, became executive, and became a CEO. Okay, so this is coming from me. And I'd be the first one to admit that a lot of managers are awful, okay? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why they're awful. We're going to take a question from a listener / viewer who sent in a question asking about this and going off on a little bit of a tirade, actually, but that's what makes it interesting. But before that, we're going to talk about what is your greatest weakness. Okay, this is a job interview question. It's a cliched job interview question that gets asked on a regular basis. In fact, it's a staple of most job interviews, and they are pretty much almost guaranteed to ask you this question in some shape or form. So we're going to talk about how to answer that. But first, I just want to thank everybody who's listening. You guys are awesome. You guys are taking the first steps, at least, to improve yourselves and learn about job search, learn about furthering your career, and that's awesome. Okay, you do this for a while, and you will start to see results. So, excellent. Between you and me, you're doing really great. Also, you know this was coming. I want to plug my courses. I've got 2 courses, one called Get Hired. So if you can't find a job, if you've been out of work for a while, you don't know what you're doing wrong, you start to feel unemployable, you feel like it's very depressing and hopeless, and you're wondering what you can do, well, maybe my course will be able to help you. Okay, there's a link in the description. It's called Get Hired, my Get Hired course. You can follow that. And I do have a couple of videos on my main YouTube channel, The Company's Expert, that give you quite in-depth details of what the course involves, what the format is, what it goes into, so you can really see what you're getting into before you pull the trigger on it. So if that's any help to you, follow the link, check it out, and improve yourself. The other course I have is in the final stages of being created, and it will be out later this week. It's called the $100 MBA, and this is a course where I take you right through an MBA, a Master's of Business Administration. And if you're somebody who would like to learn business, but quite honestly, you really don't care about spending 5 figures and taking 1 or 2 years of your life to do this, but you just want the knowledge, my course is for you. What I do is I give you a reading list of books that are used in MBA programs in some of the best universities in the world on each subject. And you can order them off Amazon. And you can even order the slightly older editions where there's it's a substantial savings. So for only a few dollars, you can order these books and you can read them at your convenience, go into the depth you want, only read the topics you're interested in, etc., etc. No tests, no evaluations. It's purely self-study, and I'm your guide. So I have videos on each of the subjects, and I'm your guide to guide you through the process. So if that's interesting to you, follow the link in the description. I will soon have a link in the description when the course is finally out. And I will be doing some videos that go into detail of what's in that course and how it works and what you can expect. So feel free to check that out also. But let's get on with it. Today, we're talking about what is your greatest weakness, and that's where we're going to start. So you're in a job interview, and you sit down, and they ask you the icebreaker question, tell me about yourself. And then they ask you things like, what are your strengths? Why should we hire you? These are good questions to get asked because you get to talk about all the things you do really well and what you have and what you know and what you've done, right? So that's great. But then you get to this question. Tell me, what is your greatest weakness? Now, especially when they ask you this in a very gruff, pointed way, it can make people pretty awkward. You're put on the spot. Let me translate the question for you. They're basically saying, listen, give us a reason why we would eliminate you from this job search. You know, I'm sure there's something wrong with you, some reason why we wouldn't want to hire you. Tell me, what is that reason? Okay. What is your greatest weakness? Now, if you haven't rehearsed this question, you know, you might be put on the spot and you might say, well, my weakness is I tend to drink a lot. And in fact, I'm getting a little bit of a problem. And, you know, I don't know. I could even affect my work. It did in my last job. Right? Now you've just eliminated yourself. Right? Now, that's a pretty extreme example, but you get the point. They're fishing for the dirt on you. And what they're hoping is that you will just hand this to them on a plate so that they don't even have to do any research. They don't have to call references. They don't have to verify things on your resume. They just ask you and you tell them. Isn't that an easy job? So that's what's going on with this question. That's the reason why they're asking the question. Now, it's funny because if you ask a recruiter why they ask this question, they'll say, oh, well, we just want to know that, you know, you're not super arrogant. You acknowledge that you have weaknesses and that you are actively working to remedy those weaknesses. That's what we're checking for. Good one. Yeah. Now, okay. Let me clear up. If you see what I'm saying, let me clarify here. Some recruiters might actually be doing that. Some of the more enlightened ones. However, as I think a lot of you guys know that have been to job interviews, you know this from experience, they're not actually employing that reasoning. They're just trying to get the dirt on you. And if you actually give them an honest to God weakness, there's a good chance they'll eliminate you for it. That's your reward for honesty. Don't you love this process? So that's the problem with this question. Okay. The official line from HR, and keeping in mind, I taught HR in universities to recruiters in HR programs and business programs. Okay, so I think I know what I'm talking about here. The official line is that, it's just to see if you are aware of your weaknesses and you've taken steps to try and overcome them. That's the official line. The actual line is, no, we want the dirt on you. Okay, so that's what this question is for. So let's talk about it. Now, let me get a couple of things out of the way first. Somebody asks you, what's your greatest weakness? And you say, chocolate. Ha, 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 ha. And the recruiter says to you, wow, I've never heard that before. You are very witty. Or you say, kryptonite. And then they laugh and laugh and laugh because you made that up. Okay, don't do that. Don't give a witty deflection to the question. Everybody thinks that they're so witty when they do this. Usually they're about 20 years old when they when they think this way. But the reality is that the recruiter has heard this many, many times. It's not funny. It's just annoying. It just makes the interview take that much longer to get you to answer this question. So don't do that, okay? Now, first of all, another common thing is to say, well, I have no weaknesses, right? Don't do that either. No one believes that, and it's not true. Everybody's got weaknesses. For me, it's my incredible good looks and boyish charm, you know? Everybody's got weaknesses. And so if you say, well, you know, I have no weaknesses, that comes across as very arrogant, and they don't believe you. So that, unfortunately, is a fail on this question, okay? So you can't say that either, okay? Now, let me tell you what I recommend you say when they ask you this question, okay? Here's the deal. You have to give a genuine answer, okay? You can't deflect the question. You can't give a smart-ass answer. You have to actually give them something real, okay? If you don't, they'll sort of say, okay, well, this person is hostile. They're not being honest. They're not being open. And, you know, that's a red flag right there, okay? So you got to give them something. So I recommend that you answer in this format, okay? First of all, you tell them something good that you do. Okay, I do this. I am a very friendly person. I'm a very hard worker. I have great attention to detail, whatever. You tell them something good that you do. And then you say, but unfortunately, it can lead to this. Okay, it's a side effect. So for example, I'm a very friendly person, but unfortunately, sometimes people can take advantage of that. Right? Okay, so you say a good thing. Then you give a bad side effect of it. It can lead to this thing. And then finally, you say, but this is how I fix it. Okay? So good, but it leads to this, but then I fix it. Okay? So the answer I always use as an illustration of this is somebody asks you, what's your greatest weakness? And you say, well, I have very high standards, but unfortunately, not everybody shares those standards, and it can lead to some conflict with some coworkers. But what I found is that with some great communication skills, taking the time to communicate well with people can smooth that over, and it's never a problem. And that's my answer. I do this good thing. I have high standards, but it can lead to this bad thing. Unfortunately, people don't share it. It leads to conflict with other people. But then I fix the whole thing by doing this great thing. I have great communication skills. I found that if I take the time to really communicate well with people, it can smooth all that conflict over, and it's never a problem. Okay? So, what you've done is you've answered the question. Now, I also, incidentally, I recommend being honest. Like when you come to use this template to make your answer, make it honest to you, right? I'm sure you do some great thing that's really awesome. And I'm sure that it can have a side effect. For example, I tend to really pay attention to detail, but unfortunately that can take a bit of time. And sometimes it, may push up against some deadlines. But then I do this thing, it fixes the problem, it fixes the deadlines, right? So tailor the answer to you. Okay, so then it's 100% honest, right? Now, the reason why you don't fail by giving this answer is, first of all, you've actually used this answer to say something negative, but the negative thing is forgivable because it's an honest, unavoidable side effect of a good thing. So no one's going to blame you for that negative effect, right? That's the idea. You have given something negative, but no one's going to blame you for it. It's a side effect of doing something good, and it's unavoidable. Okay? Then, on top of that, you have used this question as a platform to actually talk about two strengths that you do. And you would get a perfect score if those two strengths that you mention are two things that they've said they're looking for in the job description. So maybe they've said, like, we're looking for somebody who, is a great team player, or, whatever other baloney jargon they use. Someone who has great communication skills, someone who has a very good sense of public relations, someone who has, a very good sales ability, whatever they've said they're looking for. You would get top marks if you were genuine, use this formula, said you do a good thing, but it leads to this bad thing, but then you use your exceptional sales skills to fix that problem. Right? So that would be even more perfect. It may not always be possible to hit a hole in one like that, but the point is you say a good thing, then you say a negative side effect that good thing has, it's unavoidable, and then you say how you fix it. Okay? So that would be the way I would recommend that you answer this question. Okay? Don't give an actual straight up weakness. Okay? Something that you do that's bad. Because remember, you're making a first impression here. And if one of the only things they know about you is that you do this bad thing, you've just handed them a reason to reject you right there. Okay? Yeah, they asked you for one, but you gave them it. Right? Or you gave it to them. I try and use good grammar. You know me. So that's kind of the deal with this question. Okay, so that's what's going on here. That's what is going through the recruiter's mind. That's what they're fishing for. This is a good answer to use. This is why it's good. And it's a template. You fill in the blanks using things that are true to you. And if you answer this way, no one will be able to eliminate you for a weakness, because the negative thing you've said is perfectly justifiable, perfectly understandable. It would happen to anyone who has those good traits. And you've also told them 2 amazing things about you in the process. Top marks. So hopefully that makes sense. So if you have any further questions about this, you can leave a comment. Okay. But moving on to our other topic for today, which is why managers are so bad. This is something I like to talk about. I enjoy business topics. I end up talking a lot about how to get hired, which I know a lot of people I have a lot of questions about, but I enjoy talking about business. I have a lot to say about business based on my experiences with business. So why are managers so bad? Now, we've had the privilege of having somebody send in a question. And this is from somebody called, if I'm saying this correctly, I'm sure I'm not, Okin Ariaram. Okin Ariaram. So Okin writes, what about the very prevalent case of people being promoted to management positions for absolutely wrong reasons? That's a great way to start. I agree with you. These include fraternizing and brown-nosing the executive layer, lying and taking taking credit, should I say, for other people's work, hiding your failures, and putting blame on other workers. Okay. I have seen people do that, yes. Okin goes on. He or she says, almost all the bad managers I've witnessed in the 35 years of working as an adult have shared these traits, yet I see them promoted over the good, hard workers who are committed and well-liked by colleagues and clients. Fair enough. I'm sure you're not alone in that, Okin. I'm sure a lot of people have observed exactly the same thing. Okin concludes, you could argue a company thinks a good worker will not commit to a hard corporate decision and therefore would be unreliable as a manager when the corporation expects you to do unethical decisions. Whereas a lying, brown-nosing narcissist, manager, will not even flinch. However, what baffles me is how it is not seen how a bad manager is bad for business. And that's the question at the end. Okay. Okin, you go into a bit of a tirade here. But, I think a lot of people would agree with this. I think this is something that I would think almost everybody has witnessed at some point in their career. The things that you mentioned here, yes, I would be the first to agree with that. Now, here's the deal, okay? Look, I've been a worker. I've been a manager. Okay. So I feel that I can look at this from both sides here. Now I've worked across 5 different industries, but I'm sure playing the odds, none of those industries will be the industries that Okin is in. I don't know what Okin does or the context that he has witnessed this stuff. But that doesn't really matter because most people, I'm sure, can share in this. Let's get into this here. Now, first of all, I want to agree with Okin. Everything he says here, as far as I know, is perfectly accurate. I've seen cases of this myself. And if I had to guess, I would say that greater than 50% of all managers at all levels seriously underperform. Now, I'm sure it's tolerated more in some situations than others, but based on the data that we have in management science, people have studied these kinds of issues in organizational theory, and they've collected a lot of data. Professors at universities, professors of business are mainly the ones that have been looking into this for the last 200 years. They've been collecting data on this, on people issues. And yeah, everything I've seen in university when they talk about that research tends to show this. That's where I have to go to get like objective information, because I can speak from my experiences, but I mean, it's just anecdotal. It's just my experiences. I could be a wild exception for all I know. But no, everything that we've seen tends to confirm this kind of thing. And it does happen. Okay? But at the same time, I want to give the counter perspective here. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that this is in fact what is going on, but I'm saying that this could be what's going on in some of the situations that Okin describes, or across the board. Okay? Because as you guys know, I'm sure, there is a difference between the perspective of a worker and the perspective of a manager. And I think the reality is often somewhere in between. Okay, if there is such thing as a sort of objective truth, it's somewhere in between. But having been both, when you're a worker, a common thing for a lot of workers, and I'm totally generalizing here, is that managers are idiots. Managers are people pleasers. Managers are two-faced. And managers are jerks. I think that would sum up probably a majority view of workers about managers. That's the worker perspective, okay? Now, if I had to sum up the manager perspective, once again, extremely general across all industries, across all types of managers, all situations, all organizations, I would say that from their perspective, workers are ignorant, workers are self-centered, workers they lack understanding of what business is and what the manager's role is. So I would say that would be a common opinion, possibly not a prevailing opinion, but a common opinion by a lot of managers. I'm sure they've felt that at some time about one or more of their subordinates. Okay? Sometimes it's justified, sometimes it's not. Okay? Now, I think that most people listening to this, you don't need an explanation of Okin's assertions here. You probably agree with this, and I agree with it too. I've seen this stuff firsthand. But what I want to just point out is that, Okin mentions that he's witnessed this over 35 years of working as an adult. Okay? Now, here's the deal. I'm thinking back to when I was a worker, when at the beginning of my career, and I didn't take business in university in the beginning. I was a technical person. I have an engineering degree. I worked with technicians, basically grease monkeys, and I would get dirty as hell every day. I'd roll up my sleeves. I'd do that kind of work, and so people in that kind of job have certain opinions about their boss, and I shared those. I thought much of what Okin thinks, but after holding some of these opinions across the board, for example, what was it? The people who get promoted are not hard workers. They, what was it? They fraternize and brown nose with the executives. They lie, they take credit for other people's works, and they hide their failures by putting blame on workers. I think I shared every one of those opinions across the board for managers. The manager perspective on this, however, is that if you keep witnessing these people, that this is how you describe them, getting promoted, okay, maybe you're missing something here. I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying it's possible. Okay, because the counter perspective of this is that, first of all, fraternizing and brown-nosing the executive layer. Now, yes, there are some pretty nasty individuals that are completely two-faced, that they suck up to management. They're completely ingratiating to very slimy and spineless degree. And I'd be the first to admit that. I've seen a lot of people with no backbone doing this, telling the boss one thing and, doing another. And pretending to be friends. And it's just really off-putting. But the flip side to this is that, think of it this way. If you're the boss, if you were the supervisor, and you had to pick one of the workers to be your sort of assistant or your number two, attitude does matter. You're not going to pick the person that hates you because you're the supervisor, right? I mean, this is a factor, right? Or you're not going to pick the person that, although they might be a good worker, they are just pathologically opposed to anyone telling them what to do, right? Is that the person you want as your number two? Probably not, right? You have to work with them. And if you guys don't get along or, are able to communicate, able to work together, it's going to be a disaster. So whoever you choose, they have to get along with you to a certain degree, right? I mean, this is a factor. Attitude is very important. You could be the most amazing worker in a company. Okay. You could be, the person that, when it comes to technical skill and technical knowledge, you could be hands down better than anybody else. But the problem is, if people can't work with you, if no boss can work with you, because you automatically, just as a matter of principle, resist anything they want you to do. If they suggest something, you automatically suggest the opposite. If that's the attitude with which you work, that's going to be a problem. I mean, you don't need me to convince you of this. Hopefully you can see, no good is going to come. It's going to be a problem. It's going to hold you back, because if people can't work with you, that's a problem. Now, if the boss can't work with you, that's going to be a problem too. And if every level of boss above you can't work with you, that is a big problem. So if a manager has to choose a worker to promote and make them supervisor or make them a junior manager, attitude is going to be a problem. So that's a factor. And I have encountered workers, I've dealt with workers that don't understand this. Okay. Attitude is important. Maybe this is not obvious in large organizations. In smaller organizations, this is certainly obvious. You guys need to work together, and you need to trust people. So that's what I would say to this. Now, taking credit for other people's work, well, I'm being kind here because I have seen managers take credit for other people's work and not give people their due. So yeah, that's a thing. But just to try and demonstrate there's another side to this, the perspective of a manager is to manage people. They're managing money, or they're managing projects, or they're managing people, or sometimes all three. And the idea is that they don't do the work. They coordinate the workers who do the work, right? So by definition, they're not actually doing the work themselves. So taking credit for other people's work, well, that might be a matter of perspective, because if their operation is successful, they will be praised for their management skills, their ability to coordinate and communicate and orchestrate people working, But yes, the workers do the actual work, right? So once again, you've got to understand the different roles here. And hiding your failures and putting blame on other workers, yeah, I've seen that. That one's a bit harder to justify. In my experience, the manager is responsible. That's what being a manager is. If you're the boss, if you have authority, you are responsible. It's just that simple. So yeah, it's kind of hard to claim that there's a different perspective on that one. So certainly one point to oak in there. Now, the other thing that Okin mentions is, yet I see them being promoted over the good, hard workers who are committed and well-liked by colleagues and clients. Well, yes. Okay. Once again, the flip side of that would be if you're a great worker and you get along with your coworkers well, but you can't get along with a manager just by virtue of them being a manager. You don't like being told what to do. And you don't understand that the manager has to take into account your perspective, but also has to take into account many other people's perspective. They have to take into account the perspective of your coworkers. They have to take into account perspectives of people you don't even see, like accountants, like the people that enforce the rules in your organization, and their boss. And there might be even more people that have a perspective that the manager has to take into account when they make decisions. So just playing the odds, they will not always side with you. It's not that they have anything against you, it's just that they can't always side with workers. They can't always do exactly what the workers would have them do, because there's a whole other side to things that constrain them. Okay, I'll give you an example. I got a complaint many years ago. I was running a shop and I got a complaint from a supervisor. I was the manager, they were the supervisor, and then we had a bunch of workers. The supervisor came to me and said, look, I don't understand why you can't just buy this other piece of equipment, because the fact that you don't have that piece of equipment, it means we have to operate in this very inefficient way. We've got to do all these extra steps. It's very manually labor intensive. And it's ridiculous that we have to keep doing this. And I said, well, and this person was actually quite agitated about this. And I can understand. I mean, yeah, it sucks when you can't work in an optimal way, and it can be damn frustrating. But I was saying, well, look, here's my problem, okay? That piece of equipment that you want me to buy, that costs $100,000. Now, you tell me what you're going to do to make $100,000 more money, more, not revenue, but profit, okay, in, say, a 2-year period that's going to pay for that equipment. Explain that to me, because if you can, I'm with you on this. But unless you got something, I can't do it. Sorry. Now, this actual conversation took a hell of a lot longer than that. It was a lot more detailed. But most, I think I had like a little bit extra time on that day or something. But, a lot of these conversations, people don't have those conversations in depth. They just say, no, sorry, you can't do it. And that's the extent that the subordinate will know of the constraints that the manager is under. So there's many ways to look at this. I'm certainly not justifying and saying that Okin is wrong on this, because he's not, because there's a lot of bad managers. But I'm just saying that sometimes, because you can't see all the constraints, you can't see the whole picture, some people tend to incorrectly conclude some of this stuff. And they're just missing a part of the puzzle here. Okay, I'm not justifying bad managers. I'm just saying that sometimes this stuff comes into play here. But yeah, the other part of this is that it's just easier to not do anything, right? And a lot of managers do that. I think that's kind of the major stuff here. But yeah, I'll just share one other thing. Now, I worked for, early in my career, I was in the railroad for a few years, and I worked for one of the Canadian railroads that's up here in Canada. And in our little tiny corner of the company, I was actually a contractor for them. I didn't work directly for them, but I was in there on their property, helping to run things. And they had a policy. It was more of a practice. It wasn't a formal policy, but what they would do is, if they had a group of workers, like a gang of workers, and they needed to appoint one of them to be the supervisor. Okay, so you had 10 workers, you needed a supervisor, and the way they figured is that they would want to hire someone internally that had experience, so they would promote one of the workers. So you end up with 9 workers and 1 supervisor. Now, you would think that they would take the best, most experienced, most hardworking and dedicated employee and make them the supervisor. Excuse me. No, they didn't. They did the opposite. They took the least productive worker that did the least amount of work, that was the least valuable working as a worker, okay, on the shop floor or whatever. and they made them the supervisor. And the logic was, I love this, was that if you're going to lose one worker off the production floor, you don't want to lose your best worker. That would have the biggest impact on your performance of this particular group. So if you take the least valuable worker off the floor and you make them the supervisor, it impacts the productivity of your group the least. It's the most efficient way to make that decision. I thought that was hilarious. But these people did it. They were dead serious. You know, you think it's a joke and you're waiting for the punchline. The punchline doesn't come. They're dead serious. You know, and this is how they run their organization. So I totally agree with Okin in some of these situations. Yeah, you get horrible people that get kicked upstairs, and you have understandably bad results, but people don't seem to care because they have decided the culture there is that, oh, you know, that's just what you expect. That's the standard performance for a supervisor. And the workers maybe all end up hating the supervisor because the supervisor is practically useless. And the company says, oh, well, that's just a standard attitude that workers have towards their supervisor. That's normal. They normalize these glaring problems. And that's why their organization is underperforming. But they might be in a business where there isn't very stiff competition. So they don't really care. And they don't see the missed opportunity and the opportunity cost that is going on. So, yeah, that's terrible. And that's one of the reasons why you have so many terrible managers. The other big reason, of course, is that they just don't teach management skills to people in management positions. And it's not valued. Any one of you guys that gets an MBA, unless you're going for a job that specifically demands an MBA, it's stated in the job requirements that an MBA is valued or required. Unless you're going for a job like that, I'm willing to bet that most people find that their MBA is really not as valuable as they've been led to believe. And this is one of the reasons why. Because good management skills are not actually valued. The other reason being is that there still are a lot of people out there that have MBAs that are idiots. Unfortunately, it gives the MBA a bad name. Anyway, hopefully that answers Okin's question. It wasn't really a question. It was sort of, I guess, more of a general discussion about it. But he was just wondering, baffles me is how this is not seen, how a bad manager is bad for business. Yeah, exactly. These are some of the reasons why it's not regarded as a real issue. And it is a real issue. You're perfectly correct. And, more companies should wise up to this. If they did, then we'd be able to actually fix a lot of the problems in organizations, not the least of which is that bad managers are the single number one cause, the single biggest cause that drives good workers away. It leads them to quit and go to their competitors, their competition. So thank you to Okin for sending in this question. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions and comments. You guys are awesome. I do appreciate you listening to my podcast. Hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully, it's generated some food for thought. If you have any comments, leave them in the comments section. Check out my courses, subscribe to my channels, and have yourselves a great couple of days. You guys are awesome, and I will see you on the next video. Take care.